When we think of mental illness, we typically think of that as being an issue that only affects adults. Unfortunately, mental illness is something that is widespread among our children. Among youth ages 13 to 18, approximately 1 in 5 will experience a severe mental disorder at some point. For children ages 8 to 15, the estimate is 13%. It's also estimated that just over half of all children ages 8 to 15 have received mental health services over the past year. Even mental illness among adults is really an issue that begins during the childhood years. Half of all chronic mental illness begins by age 14, and 3/4 begins by age 24. And it can often be years or even decades between the time when children first begin exhibiting symptoms and when they actually start receiving help. In the United States, although suicide is the 10th leading cause of death, among children ages 10 to 14, it's the 3rd leading cause. And among those ages 15 to 24, it's the 2nd leading cause of death. And these issues aren't simply a matter of some kind of increased awareness of mental health issues among children. The research shows that these rates have been increasing over time. Rates of depression and anxiety among young people in America have been increasing steadily for the past 50 to 70 years. Some studies show as much as 5 to 8 times. Other studies have shown in recent years a 37% increase in the number of teens who have reported experiencing a major depressive episode during the past 12 months, and a 24% increase in the number of mental health hospitalizations for children. This alarming trend is only expected to continue. The World Health Organization estimates that by 2020, neuropsychiatric disorders among children will swell by over 50% in comparison with other health-related problems, making them one of the 5 leading causes of childhood illness, disability, and death. Clearly, this is a problem that needs to be addressed.
A Department of Justice study done in 2009 showed 60% of the youth surveyed had either directly as a victim or indirectly as a witness experienced violence. This same study also found 1 in 10 children witnessed a family member attacking another family member. A 2015 report prepared by the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry discovered a rise in the occurrence of violent actions in children as young as 3 years old. The report listed influences that could increase the likelihood of future violent behavior. These are exposure to violence in media, that is TV, movies, etc., being the victim of physical abuse, the exposure to violence in the home or community, being the victim of bullying, the use of drugs or alcohol, and family problems such as divorce. According to the World Health Organization, the home environment is key regarding whether violent behavior in children will develop. Their report also stated that a low level of attachment between the parents and their children, a low level of family cohesion, and associating with delinquent peers can all contribute to youth becoming violent as adults. Fox News recently reported that 5 teenage boys were charged with murder when a massive rock was thrown from a Michigan overpass 80 miles north of Detroit. Their ages were 15 to 17. One youth threw the 6-pound rock that smashed through a truck windshield, killing the father of 4 young children. When asked, they stated they just wanted to prank people. My question for you is this: where was their conscience?
Did you know that over 13 million American kids will be bullied this year? That's 1 child every 7 minutes, 1 out of 4 teens, making bullying the most common form of violence experienced by young people in the nation. Bullying is the reason about 160,000 teens skip school each day. There's noticeably more bullying in middle school, grades 6th, 7th, and 8th, with 28% of their students experiencing bullying, than in high school, grades 9 through 12, with only 20% of their students experiencing bullying. 64% of children who were bullied did not report it, leaving only 36% being able to tell someone they had been bullied. Cyberbullying is a growing type of bullying among students today and will only continue to grow due to the enhanced use of electronic devices and increased access to smartphones. Over 80% of teens reported that they use a cell phone regularly. 24% of middle schoolers reported being cyberbullied, and 15.5% of high schoolers reported being cyberbullied. Adolescent girls are significantly more likely to have experienced cyberbullying, with a percentage of 40.6% compared to a 28.2% of boys being cyberbullied. These percentages will only continue to grow unless we come to realize our need to engage and impact our children's conscience.
In the U.S., the estimated number of drug-exposed infants born each year ranges from 100,000 to 375,000. And unfortunately today, the number of newborn babies exposed to drugs in utero, specifically opioids such as heroin, is drastically increasing, especially in the Midwest. One baby every half hour is born in the U.S. addicted to drugs. Most of these babies will experience something called neonatal abstinence syndrome, or NAS, which is a group of conditions caused when a baby withdraws from certain drugs exposed to in the womb, and since the drug is no longer available, the baby's central nervous system becomes overstimulated, causing the symptoms of withdrawal, which include irritability, tremors, difficulty sleeping, and sometimes even seizures. If the withdrawal is severe enough, we have to put the baby on something called methadone, which is an oral substitute of heroin, or morphine, just to ease the symptoms of withdrawal. This typically occurs within the first 2 to 3 days of life. According to Cincinnati's NAS clinic, Ohio has seen a 750% increase in the number of babies with NAS in the last decade. The number of delivering mothers addicted to opioids was also up 841%. According to Toledo Children's Hospital, the number of drug-dependent babies increased dramatically from 2 in 2007 to 187 in 2015, which is more than a 90-fold increase. A Toledo grandmother who now has custody of her 2 grandchildren stated, "Heroin never touched their lips, yet it's absolutely cost them everything. They've lost their life and they didn't do anything to lose it." These babies lose from day one in the womb, as drug exposure in utero can and most likely will have a negative effect on the unborn baby. Babies born to moms with heroin problems tend to be born smaller and premature. Even when they go full term, there's about a 50% chance they will be dependent on the drug. There is evidence that NAS has a long-term impact, with several studies reporting long-term outcomes, including behavioral problems such as hyperactivity and short attention span, as well as developmental problems and memory and perceptual problems. A new study out of Australia found that NAS can lead to poor performance at school, and the deficit is progressive. Other long-term outcomes in NAS include family instability, inconsistent caregiving, and out-of-home placements. The sad thing is, a lot of these mothers don't choose to abuse drugs, and individuals of all social classes are affected, not just low-income populations. Many were prescribed opioids by their doctors for chronic pain, and they eventually become addicted. With cravings becoming stronger, they turn to a cheaper street drug called heroin. Where is the conscience in our society today? Working with children and adolescents admitted to the Children's Psychiatry Unit, the majority are admitted for suicidal ideations or attempts, as well as homicidal ideations. Suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 24 years of age. If you ask these adolescents why they feel suicidal, you will hear answers such as, "I'm just depressed and I don't want to live anymore. I'm bullied at school or on the internet. I'm sexually, emotionally, or physically abused. My parents are in jail because of drug abuse, or my parents died because they overdosed on drugs, and I go from foster home to foster home. Or I use drugs myself." And what I hear all too often in the younger population, who are mostly have ADHD and are homicidal, is, "My parents took my cell phone away," or "My parents took my video game away. I didn't want to do my homework. I didn't want to do my chores. I didn't get what I wanted." Unfortunately, the children's psych units are usually full, and many return every few weeks without getting the true help they need. If you consider why these children have such reactions and thoughts, it's almost all contributory to lack of proper parenting and the lack in the current educational system. What is the solution? Where is conscience in our society today? We are in dire need to provide conscience education to our children starting at a very young age.
Data has shown that over the past 30 years, obesity in the United States has more than tripled. Today, 1 in 5 children aged 6 to 19 has obesity. School-age children that have obesity are also at higher risk for chronic health conditions such as type 2 diabetes, asthma, sleep apnea, bone and joint problems, as well as an increased risk for cardiovascular disease. It is estimated that worldwide, over 22 million children under the age of 5 have obesity. This is roughly the population of Shanghai. 40 years ago, type 2 diabetes was very rare in children. Rates of newly diagnosed type 1 and type 2 diabetes are increasing at an exponential rate. Type 1 diabetes increases at 1.8% per year. Type 2 diabetes is increasing at a rate of 4.8% per year, with many more going undiagnosed. Diabetes profoundly lessens the quality of life and shortens the life expectancy of a child or a young adult. A death from cardiovascular disease occurs every 40 seconds in the United States. That's equivalent to 25,000 deaths in 12 days' time. Our population at the University of Toledo is 23,000. Studies indicate that adolescents with long-term obesity, diabetes, and elevated cholesterol levels are at significantly higher risk for death before the age of 55. For the first time ever in our nation, children are not expected to outlive their parents. More than half the young adults aged 18 to 24 have at least one coronary heart disease risk factor, and 1/4 have advanced thickening of their artery walls. Heart disease risks increase 2 to 4% every year a young adult is obese. These chronic diseases are treatable, reversible, and preventable through dietary and lifestyle changes. Childhood and young adulthood is the perfect time to make these changes because they are in the process of establishing lifestyle habits that they will carry into the future.
Preschool children face expulsion rates 3 times higher than children in kindergarten through 12th grade, due in part to lack of attention to social emotional needs. In the course of the school year, children with mental health problems will miss as many as 18 to 22 days. Up to 14% of youth with mental health problems receive mostly D's and F's. Up to 44% of them drop out of high school. Over 10% of high school dropouts were attributable to mental health disorders. Just 38% of youth with a mood disorder such as depression or bipolar disorder receive treatment services. 75 to 80% of children and youth in need of mental health services do not receive them. Only 29% of youth expressing suicide ideation in the prior year receive mental health services. Since I've been working in the psychiatric field for the last 6 years, I've talked to several patients who are now adults. I work in the adult unit, and a lot of them started off in the children psychiatric unit. Once they're in the system, it's very hard for them to get out of the system.
Addiction is defined as a brain disorder characterized by compulsive engagement in rewarding stimuli despite adverse consequences. Drug addiction is what we all familiar with. There are actually many other addictions, like food addiction, gambling addiction, even TV addiction. Actually, any behavior, if result in people keep seeking the pleasure, ignoring the bad results, and dwelling in it hard to face reality, is all addictive behaviors. Kids actually are innocent. They are receiving whatever the school, the parents, and the society provides to them. So for example, the food, the natural, healthy, organic food never can cause addiction. We never heard about people eat a healthy vegetable fruit, they can get addicted. But fast food and deep-fried food and high-fat food can cause addiction. When people eat those high-fat food, actually a neurotransmitter in the brain called dopamine will release more. When dopamine increases, it promotes people to seek for the same pleasure again and again. So not only food can cause addiction, the society provides the kids too many other factors also can cause addiction. For example, the TV, the computer games, the amusement parks, and the kids want to escape their real life, their study, to dwell in that. They find pleasure in this kind of activity, but when they come out, when they face their real study, real life, they feel anxious and depression. This is the factor we provide to these kids, cause them to have this addiction behavior. We are really, really responsible to provide the healthy elements for their healthy growth. I'm a biomedical researcher to research e-cigarette addiction, nicotine addiction, research on this kind of smoke addiction on mice. Through my research, I know that this kind of drug, like nicotine, like other kind of pleasure facts, can cause the animal to be addicted to feel the pleasure. Even these things are very harmful to them, but they keep seeking for the feeling to feel good. And when they're out of the kind of fake pleasure stimuli, they feel very sick. So this is what I do. Actually, it fits what we see in the children today.
Some chronic disease, such as lung disease, liver disease, and mental health issues are related to smoking, drinking, and drug abuse. 90% of all adult smokers started when they were kids. Children who live with parents or siblings who smoke are up to 3 times more likely to become smokers themselves than children of non-smoking households. Every day, 3,900 youth and young adults start smoking. Teen alcohol abuse is responsible each year for nearly 200,000 ER visits and 4,300 deaths among kids under age 21. By the 8th grade, 20% have used marijuana. High schoolers have found drugs through a friend, through word of mouth, and on the internet.